Hi, I'm Mrs. Hermanson, and I wanted to explain to both parents and students what is AP language and composition because it is not like other English classes you have taken in the past. In the past, you probably got Of Mice and Men handed to you or To Kill a Mockingbird handed to you. You got questions about themes, characterization, new vocab, and so forth. This class is primarily nonfiction, where we dissect arguments. It is mostly speeches, essays, a few books, and we are going to look at how others write. And then we're going to apply that new type of writing to our own writing. This is AP language and composition, so it is indeed a writing course. Here are some of the skills we're going to work on. You will find that the Canvas site is organized for the most part by skills, especially the first 6 to 8 weeks. So you're going to look at how does an author write for a particular audience? How does that author show understanding of the audience? How does the author use reasons in detail to support a claim? One way that I like to do this is to group certain types of essays together. Now, we do have a book called Writing America, and you will be getting that book eventually, is my understanding. And that has chapters in it about writing and essays to read. I like to group new stuff with old stuff. And an example of this would be we're going to start with an essay on September 10th and 11th, written by Rick Riley, in which he writes about 9/11, the attack of the World Trade Centers and the aftermath of that. And it is a favorite essay of students, which is why I always do it. And so we're going to then group that together then with President Bush's speech that he then gave later that week, in which he implored Americans to support him in the invasion of Afghanistan. And then we're going to use that new stuff and compare it with old speeches, because it is important to read the old stuff too that students don't always want to read. And so we could put President Bush's speech next to like Patrick Henry's speech, in which he's persuading colonists to go to war, and we can compare and contrast some of their word choice, the way they use emotion. We can talk about how, even though, yes, they're talking to a group of Americans, you can tell that Americans during colonial times were slightly different in their viewpoints than Americans during 2001. And their speeches needed to reflect on that. And so I like to group different essays together and look at how did this person writing at this time period, even though they're talking about relatively the same thing and they have relatively the same goal, how did they have to change some of their rhetoric in order to convince their particular audience? And that's like a primary goal of AP language, is thinking about a writer's audience. So in the Rick Riley essay, this is what I mean by looking at writers' moves. And I'm not going to read this to you. You guys could pause the video and read this as well. But Rick Riley has this great paragraph about boys growing up playing football together and pulling each other out of these piles. And then he has another paragraph right after that one where he talks about the piles of debris and body at 9/11. And so when we're reading this essay, your student is going to pick up on that, and they're going to be like, wait a second, he's using the word pile in two totally different ways. And they will talk about, okay, so what's the effect of that on the reader? How does that add more emotion? How does that maybe help us figure out the argument that Riley is trying to make about people's reaction to 9/11 and so forth? That's just one example of what I mean by we're going to look at the way the writer writes or the writer's moves. So we read a lot of essays in here, and I promise your student is actually really going to like it. We do read some books. These are some books I have taught in the past. And you're going to look at this and say, wait a minute, she said that this class is mostly nonfiction. Okay, so true. But I can teach fiction as an argument. In The Scarlet Letter, even though that is a fictional book, Nathaniel Hawthorne there was making an argument about how the Puritan culture was too rigid. In his Huck Finn, Mark Twain is making an argument about slavery. In The Great Gatsby, which is also fiction, Fitzgerald is making an argument about the American dream. So were I to teach fiction, I would teach it in that lens of looking at a piece of fiction as a way of making an argument. We will not read all 5 of these books this year. I sort of pick and choose based on getting to know my students. The 2 I for sure want to read this year are indeed nonfiction. We're going to read the narrative of Frederick Douglass in around October, and we're going to read Into the Wild by John Krakauer around December. So these are the books we'll read amid all of the essays and speeches that we look at. I also like you to be reading a book on your own. Here are some choices, and we will talk about how to get these books to you if possible. It is important to be reading books on your own so that you can then compare these books to other things that we are reading. Whenever we're reading, I'm trying to get students to apply what they are reading to other big issues. And so I teach them something called reshape. It's just a word I made up to get them to reshape their thinking. So anytime they can connect something that they're reading, whether it is modern day or pre-20th century, they can connect it to something else they know about religion and philosophy, entertainment, social justice, history, something they might know about art and culture from this time period or another, political and current affairs, personal experience, or science and technology. And so that's just a mnemonic device. I might say to them, well, what did you do to reshape your thinking as you were reading? Can you make a connection in what we're reading here to something else you have read or experienced? So this PowerPoint was just to give you a little idea of what AP composition entails. I wish your students were here with me, but I will do my best to connect with them. I am looking forward to hearing what they have to say about these essays and looking forward to seeing what they write about.